So many people are frustrated because they've gone to their doctor, they've been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and they've been told, we don't know what causes it, but here's some medicine you can take for the rest of your life. And by the way, this medicine doesn't come without side effects. If you're one of those people that have been diagnosed with autoimmune disease, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Sjogren's, Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, or any of the others, this show is for you. We're going to do a deep dive on what actually triggers autoimmune disease, but even more importantly, we're going to dive into how you can fix it naturally. There is hope. We'll be right back with it. You unlock this door with the key of compassion. Beyond it is another world, a world of science, a world of common sense, a world of sanity. You're moving into a land of both empathy and ethics, of nutritional knowledge and empowerment. You've just crossed over to Dr. Osborne's Zone. Welcome to Dr. Osborne's Zone. Today we're going to be putting all the pieces together around autoimmune conditions. So if you've been diagnosed with autoimmunity, you're not going to want to miss this show. Now this is going to be a longer show, so those of you who want something quick, I'm going to try to give you an upfront summary, but I encourage you to watch this entire video because sometimes success equals the devil in the details, and I want to make sure that you have the details. So let's dive in. If we really want to understand the origins of autoimmune disease, we want to look at this triangle. This is what I call the triangle of health and the triangle of hope because it brings hope to people who have none or who have a long medical history with more questions than answers and more frustrations than solutions. So if you look in this triangle, you'll notice at the core is your genetic code, and you can see the three fundamental pillars around it: chemical, emotional, spiritual, and physical. These are the elements where we look for triggers of autoimmune disease, and I'm going to dive into those here now. Now let's talk about some statistics. According to the American Autoimmune Related Disorders Association, there's an estimated 50 million Americans with autoimmune disease. Now, let's think about that in terms of cancer and heart disease. Only 9 million have cancer and only 22 million have heart disease. So autoimmune disease trumps both cancer and heart disease combined. It is alarmingly going up in the last 40 to 50 years. Autoimmune disease is the #1 cause of death in women under the age of 65. We also know there are more than 100 forms of autoimmune disease that have been discovered. Symptoms cross many specialties, can affect all body organs. Medical education provides minimal learning about autoimmune disease. We know that specialists are generally unaware of interrelationships among the different autoimmune conditions. Initial symptoms are often intermittent and unspecific until the disease becomes acute. As well, research is generally disease-specific and limited in scope. More information sharing and crossover among research projects on different autoimmune disease is definitely needed in the medical profession. Now, knowing all these things, let's look at some examples of autoimmune disease I'm going to put up on the screen for you. And you might want to just pause the video here and take a screenshot. This is not by any stretch a comprehensive list of all forms of autoimmunity, but it is some of the more common ones that are diagnosed in the world today. So screenshot this image now. Now, here's what many of you have been told as it relates to autoimmune disease. The cause is unknown or it's genetic, and there's nothing you can do except take your medication. You've been told that food has nothing to do with autoimmunity, and you've been told there's no such thing probably as leaky gut. You've also probably been told that the chemicals and pesticides used in food production are safe. You may have been told that sunshine is dangerous, and I'll let you read that last bullet so that you can have a better understanding of what I mean. Now, in the current system, we have a diagnostic-centric focus, meaning identify the cluster of symptoms, give it a name, and from that name, then the doctor can proceed to prescribe a medication. And this is basically the treatment of symptoms with chemicals, but no thought actually goes into patient empowerment with diet and lifestyle changes. We know that autoimmune focus is about lifelong disease management, and that there are no cures. At least, again, this is the current system, the current model. These are the things that people are commonly told. We also know that the problem is getting worse. If you look at this diagram, you can see an epidemic rise of autoimmune disease since the 1950s. And there are a number of reasons why this has happened. We have been exposed to many things, and we'll go through those things as we go through this presentation. Now, I thought it was interesting that Time magazine published this on their cover a number of years ago, Why Your DNA Isn't Your Destiny. And I use this as a means to give you hope, because a lot of you have been told your autoimmune condition is in your genes, it's part of your family history, there's nothing you can do about it, but nothing can be further from the truth. So I want to share with you 4 fundamental beliefs that you need to train your brain to go down these roads. Now, so number 1 is this: your body can heal. Chronic inflammatory and autoimmune conditions aren't life sentences. With the right guidance and support, you can reclaim your health. I've been in practice for over 20 years, and I've seen more than 10,000 people get better. The second, genes are a gift from God, not a curse. Your genes aren't bad. They're not making a mistake. They're responding to your behaviors. So you're not bound by your genetics. Your daily choices, how you eat, move, rest, and think, determine whether your genes express illness or vitality. Number 3, drugs don't create health. Medications can play a role, but they don't fix the root causes. Real health is built through nutrition, movement, restorative sleep, stress mastery, and a deep sense of spiritual purpose. And number 4, you are in control. With the right education, you can make informed decisions that transform your life. We're here to equip you, because when you understand how your body works, everything changes. Okay, let's dive into the non-negotiables and fundamentals of health. If you're going to recover from autoimmune disease, these 6 factors are things you have to understand, because recovery from illness is not a passive process, meaning you can't just take something or allow a doctor to give you a treatment, those are passive, and you do nothing and expect recovery. If you want recovery, you have to take an active role. These 6 things are fundamental. They're not negotiable. You have to embark upon learning about these 6 if you truly, really want a recovery. So let's dive into them. Number 1, nourish with real food. Fill your plate with unprocessed, nutrient-dense foods grown by nature, not manufactured in a lab. Whole fruits, vegetables, responsibly raised proteins, and healthy fats give your cells the raw materials they need to thrive. Number 2, prioritize restorative sleep. Deep, consistent sleep is when your body repairs and heals. Aim for 7 to 9 uninterrupted hours in a cool, dark room to wake up restored and resilient. Number 3, soak up healing sunshine. Regular sensible sun exposure ignites natural vitamin D production, boosts mood, increases energy production, and supports immune strength. Even a short daily dose of morning or late afternoon light can work wonders. Number 4, move every day. Human bodies are engineered for motion. Whether it's walking, lifting, stretching, or dancing, consistent activity keeps muscles strong, joints supple, and metabolism humming. The old adage goes, use it or lose it. If you want to know more about this, check out my crash course on muscles as medicine. Number 5, hydrate with pure water. Roughly 70% of your body is water. Drinking clean, mineral-rich water throughout the day powers detoxification, digestion, and cognition. Make water your primary beverage. And number 6, breathe clean air. Fresh, pollutant-free air feeds every cell with life-giving oxygen. Whenever possible, open windows, spend time outdoors, and purify indoor air to reduce the burden of toxins on your lungs and your health. Again, these 6 fundamentals aren't negotiable. Not because I say so, but because they're tried and true. These 6 things have been the core health guidance for thousands of years. And if you really want restorative health, you have to take an active role by mastering these 6 areas. Now let's dive into triggers. I want you to look at this screen. I've put this together. This is a complex chart of all the different common triggers that we see clinically where people develop autoimmune processes. Going from left to right, you can see in that middle section, nutrient insufficiency is number one, meaning you don't have enough vitamins and minerals to help your body heal and repair or maintain itself. Number two on that list, microbial imbalances. This has to do with bacteria, yeast, viruses, parasites, microorganisms that can shift your body's metabolism into a chronic inflammatory state. These things can be measured. The third thing you see is gluten sensitivity, and gluten has a special place in this diagram, and here's why. Gluten is the number one most scientifically studied and most scientifically agreed upon cause for autoimmune disease. The classic example is celiac disease. We know gluten causes celiac disease, but we also know gluten contributes to and causes other forms of autoimmunity. So it gets its special place in this diagram. Now, next to gluten, you'll see food and chemical sensitivities. People can become or acquire allergic responses or sensitivities to many foods. So although gluten is one element, other foods can play a role in this as well, and those things can be tested for. Environmental toxins is next on the list. Environmental toxins can include anything you breathe, anything that you consume. There's chemicals in our food, there's chemicals in our air, there's chemicals that emit or outgas from the new furniture we buy, the new vehicles that we buy. We're exposed to things like heavy metals in our foods. We're exposed to heavy metals as well from environmental sources. So chemical toxins play a major role, and you can measure them. Like, the key thing with this diagram as you're looking at it is every trigger in that top row can be measured so that you can be empowered to understand what your triggers are. Next on the list, gut integrity and dysbiosis. This has to do with whether or not your gut is leaking or is permeable. If you have a leaky gut, otherwise known as intestinal permeability, then the contents of your diet go directly into your bloodstream and can create havoc on your liver and create systemic inflammation that drives the process of autoimmunity. Then you can see physical issues. We can't dismiss the physical frame. Human activity, human exercise, the frame itself. Muscle is an endocrine organ and emits different chemicals that regulate inflammation and regulate organ function. And so if you are a sedentary person, don't have good activity, this is going to be the part that plagues you. But the physical issues is very, very important, and it's most often it's one of the areas that gets completely ignored. And then we have the emotional, spiritual issue element. So this side also can contribute to autoimmune disease. If you've ever been under tremendous stress and developed illness shortly thereafter, you understand fully what I'm talking about. Stress kills. And so we have to look at the emotional and spiritual side of the equation and put it into an equal position as we do everything else on this list. So going from left to right, screenshot this image, learn these triggers, understand. What I've done is I've put in that second line, I've put different lab tests that you can ask your doctor to run so that they can measure which of these triggers you might have, and then come back to you with, hey, these are the things that you need to look at doing and changing. So again, this diagram is autoimmune disease at the top, what to investigate. That top row from left to right are the fundamental triggers of autoimmune disease. That center row beneath it are lab tests that you can request or ask for. And then that final row of boxes are the solutions, again, based on what your lab tests are showing. So screenshot this image, bookmark it, and keep it on hand. Now, what I see in my practice, oftentimes people fail to recover from their autoimmune problems. I see it, the average person that comes to see me in my practice, generally they've been to 5 or more doctors. They've had multiple autoimmune diagnoses. They've been on medicines for years. And the reason they're not getting any better, many of them have tried to change their diet. Many of them have tried to exercise and get sunshine. Many of them have tried to do these fundamental things, but they're missing key elements. And when you're missing key elements, we call this piecemealing, right? It's when you do one thing that could be helpful, but we have to remember that autoimmune disease is not a smoking bullet. There's no one fix. It's multifactorial. It's why you need to address all of these things as close to simultaneous as you can, because if you don't, if you have 8 or 9 different triggers and only address 2, you're not really going to be comprehensive in your approach, and you're going to meet with resistance and failure. So I encourage any of you who have already tried doing it yourself at home, where you've tried changing your diet and then that didn't work, and then you tried exercise and then that didn't work, and you made sure you were getting sleep, but in and of itself that didn't work. You've got to put it all together, and that's what this series is about. Health happens when your genes are happy, and your genes are happy when you surround them or bathe them in an environment that's conducive to their healthy expression. So keep it in mind again, your genes are not a curse. Your genes aren't bad. They're not wrong. You have to look for and identify your behaviors and how those behaviors can upset your genes, leading to poor phenotypical expression. Phenotype means your genes plus your environment equals you. And we want that to be a smile, health, happiness, as opposed to illness. So let's dive in. I'm breaking down each section. We'll go through each one and fill in the details for you so that you have a good understanding. So we're going to start with nutrient insufficiency. So if you look at the left, it's nice and bold. We're going to go into nutrients. I want you to understand something about nutrition. If we look at the field of biochemistry, basically it equates to nutrition. All of the known factors involving autoimmune disease are affected by nutrition. This is why it's so alarming that so many doctors don't have this conversation with their patients. Nutrition is the crux of how your body heals and repairs. Take this quote from the Gluten medical textbook of physiology. Each of the 100 trillion cells in the human being is a living structure that can survive indefinitely, and in most instances can even reproduce itself, provided its surrounding fluids contain appropriate nutrients. Key word there, nutrients. Now, nutrition and the immune system is critical. And remember, autoimmune disease is an immune system that is, some would argue that it's an immune system that's overreacting or attacking the body. But I would really say your immune system doesn't make mistakes. Your immune system becomes dysregulated because it doesn't have the right nutrients to help it understand how to behave properly. It's kind of like parenting. You can have a kid that runs amok if he's got really horrible parents. You've been somewhere, you've been out to a restaurant where that was the case, you've been out in public where that was the case. Well, think of nutrients as the parents of your immune cells. And if you lack healthy amounts of good nutrients, your immune cells will misbehave, and they'll run amok, and they'll create a heightened sense of inflammation throughout your body. If you look at this diagram from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, I love it because it so beautifully expresses how the immune system plays a role in your body's regulation against everything, right? Because we look at the environment, look at the storm clouds above, the microorganisms, the parasites, the malignant cells that are cancerous, the allergens, the environmental toxins, all coming. Those are all coming. That never quits. Throughout your life, those things are always going to be coming at you. But you look at the umbrella of your immune system, the skin, the mucosal immunity, the specialized functions like lysozymes and phagocytes and immunoglobulins or antibodies. And then you have cell-mediated immunity and complement immunity and chemicals like interferon. And all these things are part of the weapons of your immune system's ability to protect you from the environment, from the constant barrage of the environment. But guess what regulates that umbrella? Vitamins and minerals. That's why they're so crucial. Because when you don't have adequate nutrients, that umbrella, those different systems that build that umbrella in that image don't function properly, and now your umbrella has leaks in it. And when it has leaks in it, all those environmental storm pieces come flooding through into your body. Here's just one example. Now, I mean, we could talk literally for days about all the different types of examples, but I want to give you one example of how one nutrient plays a major immunoregulatory role. You see here, vitamin D deficiency and decreased exposure to solar UVB radiation have been demonstrated to increase the risks of many common cancers. And then we get into type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. What's the theme there? Type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and MS are autoimmune conditions. Cancer is end-stage autoimmune disease. If nobody's ever told you that, maybe this is the first time you're hearing it, but cancer is what happens when you've had an autoimmune process gone rogue long enough that your body can no longer keep up. But vitamin D deficiency is linked to those conditions. Look at the diagram to the right. You'll notice vitamin D, and if you look at that third box kind of in the middle underneath 125-OHD biologically active, you'll see there immunomodulatory effects. We'll blow in up on that for you. Notice multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, and periodontal disease, all linked to not adequate or to inadequate vitamin D status. Vitamin D is the one example I'm giving you here that without it, your immune system becomes dysregulated. Now, do other nutrients play a role in that? Absolutely. Zinc plays a role in immunoregulation. Selenium plays a role. Copper, B vitamins play a role. But this is my point. The nutrients, without them, your immune system is lost. It doesn't know how to behave properly. It doesn't know how to regulate. It can't regulate things as well, and it makes you more susceptible to the development of autoimmunity. So if you've got a diagnosis of autoimmune disease and your doctors haven't done nutrient testing, that's step one. You really need that part done as quickly as possible. So where do we get nutrients? Essential nutrients from food. These are the fundamental building blocks of the body: vitamins, minerals, carbs, fats, proteins, nucleic acids, and water are the key nutrients that we get from food. One deficiency can inhibit the healing process. The average autoimmune patient has at least 4. I've got data going back almost 25 years on nutritional studies in autoimmune cases where we've been documenting this for a long time. Minimum 4, oftentimes many more even than that. The vitamin D, B12, zinc, water, and omega-3 are probably the top that we see, clinically speaking. For most nutrients, serum testing has limited value. Not for all, but for most. And I'll give you a list here in just a moment. We also know that gut function problems must be ruled out because one of the causes of nutritional deficiency is gut inflammation. If your gut's broken or inflamed and your digestion and absorption aren't working properly, you're going to be more prone to nutritional deficiency. Therefore, ergo, you're going to be more prone to the development of autoimmune conditions because nutrients regulate the immune system's reactions. Let's take a look at this next slide. You're going to see that water is a nutrient, oftentimes ignored, right? People talk about drink more water, but what about the quality of the water, how it's filtered, whether it's RO? But water is very, very important. It's one of the primary nutrients that the body needs to sustain life. It regulates the viscosity of your blood flow. It ensures that your blood can carry nutrients effectively to all of your tissues. So if you're dehydrated or you're under drinking, you can't detox as well, you can't move fluids around as well, you can't move oxygen around as well, and then your energy production suffers. And when energy production goes down, healing goes down. When you can't make adequate energy, cellularly speaking, your body struggles to heal and repair and maintain itself. Oxygen, we need that. Now that's all around us, and most people aren't deficient in oxygen per se. They can develop nutritional anemias that reduce their ability to deliver oxygen to their cells. For example, one of the top nutritional deficiencies that we see, especially with people with gluten issues and autoimmunity, is iron. Iron deficiency causes anemia, and that very anemia can lead to reduced oxygen carriage to your tissues. This makes it very challenging for your body to generate adequate energy. It can lead to, aside from the kind of the classic anemia, we've got fatigue, shortness of breath, brain fog, muscle aches and muscle pains, stiffness, trouble sleeping. Anemia is a big one, and oxygen plays a role in that, and nutrients play a role in how oxygen is delivered. Iron, zinc, copper, vitamin C, vitamin E, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin B6, vitamin B12, and folate all play a role in making red blood cells and maturing them so that they're capable of carrying that oxygen to your tissue. The other thing that's important is sunshine. People don't consider sunshine a nutrient. I do. I think sun is arguably one of the most powerful medicines in the world that also is underutilized. We have a sunshine phobia currently going on in our culture, where even yesterday I was in the clinic, and a patient was telling me how their dermatologist had told them absolutely avoid the sun at all costs no matter what. I'm like, what century is that doctor in? You need sunshine. Aside from sunshine being, one of the main sources of vitamin D production by the body, you need sunshine to make melatonin. You need sunshine for your mitochondria to run efficiently. Sun is so critical as a form of medicine, and it's so feared. The analogy I like to use, water can kill you, water can drown you, but we don't quit drinking it for fear of drowning. Well, sunshine can burn you, and it can cause cancer if you burn your skin repetitively. But generally, intelligent sunshine consumption without burning, get sunshine to the tolerance of your skin on a regular basis without burning, is healthy. It's safe, and it's medicine. Don't forget it. And remember what I showed you earlier about vitamin D and multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis and psoriasis and type 1 diabetes. It's directly linked to an increased risk for those autoimmune conditions. And where do you get your vitamin D? You get it from sunshine and fatty animal-based foods. The other thing we have to consider here around nutrients is medicine. Now, a lot of you are like, what do you mean medicine? Medicine is not nutrients. You're right, it isn't. But medicine causes nutritional deficiency. Take a look at this book. This is one of the medical texts. This copy's been around for over 20 years. It's called the Drug-Induced Nutrient Depletion Handbook, written by pharmacists. And it's another topic, unfortunately, that doctors dismiss. In medical school, it's not taught. This is not a textbook handed out to first-year interns, and they're not told to study it. They're not told that, hey, you need to understand the consequence of the medicine that you're going to prescribe nutritionally. But drugs cause vitamin and mineral deficiencies. There are about 5 textbooks medically written on this topic. I own them all. And this topic is one I think is very important because we use so many medicines in our society today. And kind of a classic example of drugs that cause nutrition deficiency, well, one is just birth control pills. Ladies, if you've ever been on them, they can deplete folate and vitamin B2 and magnesium. We know that statin drugs for cholesterol can block CoQ10, a critical nutrient for energy health. We know that diabetic medication can inhibit vitamin B12 and folate and CoQ10. We know that many common medications, even pain medications, can block vitamin C and iron and folate. So if you're on medicine, or if you've been on medicine for any great length of time, this is a conversation you should be looking to have with your prescribing doctor. They may not know the answer, but you should still engage in the conversation. And even if your doctor doesn't have an answer, you should engage in the investigative research to understand what nutrients that your medications are depleting. Because if you're not correcting those, you could create bigger problems for yourself down the road. Drug-induced nutrient deficiency is a very, very common problem, and I see it on a daily basis in my clinic. So here's a little diagram to kind of maybe take a screenshot of. This is an action step that you can do. If you're on a medicine prescribed that has no nutrient depleting qualities, you want to have follow-up with your doctor. Ideally, ask your doctor for nutritional testing. Now, many doctors don't have that training and will dismiss you. One of the things you can do if you want to get tested is we actually offer testing, intracellular nutrient analysis testing, online direct to you. We'll put a link up below this video for you if you want to read more about how you can get your vitamin and mineral levels checked. But it should be done if you're on medications. It should be something that you're monitoring. And depending on what you're deficient in, you should consider supplementation as a secondary element to help your body, right? To prevent the deficiencies that might lead to other problems. It's my recommendation that you do that twice a year. The lab testing on this can be done. It's not hard to do. It's a simple blood draw, and twice a year gives you a good indicator of how you can change up your diet and your supplementation to accommodate what your body's needs are. Hope is such a powerful tool, and it's a requirement for healing. And that's why next I want to share with you Shanna's story. Her amazing autoimmune recovery will blow you away.
I had when I came to
Called an iodine loading test. You can ask your doctor about it. 25-OHD, that's a common test that can be ordered by most doctors, and most doctors are willing to order it. An iron panel with ferritin helps you understand your iron better. A CBC and chemistry profile can sometimes lead to a better understanding of nutritional status. There's a test called homocysteine, which is an independent marker that can help understand your B12 and folate and B6 status. Hemoglobin A1C. This is a good, not so much because it detects nutritional deficiency, but because it helps to detect carbohydrate overload. If you're eating too many carbohydrates for what you're expending, generally you're going to have an elevated A1C. You can check for CRP. In this case, HS stands for high sensitivity. CRP is an inflammatory chemical. There's another inflammatory chemical called ESR, not on this list, you can ask for, but a lot of times with autoimmune disease, doctors are already ordering it. And then insulin. Insulin's a good marker. Insurance covers it. It tells you a lot about carbohydrates as well. Are you over-consuming carbohydrates? Now, when it comes to nutritional testing of vitamins and minerals, be very cautious about serum lab tests. There are exceptions to that rule, one of them being the vitamin D test. So in the serum, 25-OHD is a really good way to assess vitamin D. And iron and ferritin are a really good way to assess iron. But when it comes to the other nutrients, serum lab tests are wanting, right? Your serum levels of nutrients generally are a reflection of your last meal. They change from day to day very rapidly. They don't account for something called liver redistribution. Your liver can store nutrients, and so when your cells of your body need more of a nutrient, they can call on the liver, and the liver will pump out its stored reserves into the bloodstream to get to that tissue. And if you're drawing your blood when the liver's redistributing the nutrient, you can get a false normal level, or in even some cases a false high level. So serum can be tricked. It's not super accurate. This goes back to what's the best way overall to measure nutritional status over time. It's called INA, intracellular nutrition analysis, or intracellular nutrient analysis. And again, I'll put a link below and you can read more about that. Now, I was talking about drug-induced nutritional deficiencies earlier. I'm going to pause for just a minute on this screen and pop it up for you. These are some of the more common medications that are prescribed. This is not intended to be the master list of every drug, but if you're on these key categories of medications, screenshot this. This is a good starting place for you in your research, and use this as a tool. Okay, let's go down now back to our diagram on triggers for autoimmune disease. We'll go to the far right of this matrix, this autoimmune matrix, under gut integrity and dysbiosis. So a lot of people don't realize that the act of eating is the act of warfare. It's you versus the environment. When you eat, food is not necessarily innocent. There are things in food, even in organic, healthy food, there are microbes and other things that we're exposed to, and these things can be inflammatory. The job of our gut is that it's an area where we are quarantined away from the bloodstream. So the gut's role is to take food, to digest and break it down, remove the things that might be harmful or dangerous to the body through the feces, through the poop, and to hang on to the things that are helpful, right? So the gut's basically a long tube that separates good from bad and helps you absorb good. And so the integrity of the gut lining becomes ever critical, especially when it comes to autoimmune disease. In research today, there's a new term. It's called intestinal hyperpermeability. I say a new term, it's 20 years old. Leaky gut is a layman's way of saying intestinal hyperpermeability, and it's a very real and well-documented phenomena and a cause of autoimmune disease. So if you have intestinal integrity issues because you have permeability or leaky gut, understand that the things in your gut can now leak into your bloodstream, over-triggering your immune system. So your immune system over time becomes more and more hyper-responsive, hypersensitive, and these things leaking in keep your immune system engaged in attack mode. So we want the gut lining to be sealed. 70% of your immune system is right behind your gut wall. There's a name for it. It's called the gastro-associated lymphoid tissue, or the GALT. So the gut's responsible for digestion and absorption, the destruction and elimination of toxins, for quarantining those toxins away. The gut also harbors the microbiome. Your microbiome are the living microorganisms in your GI tract that help you digest. They also help you make vitamins. They also send messages to your immune system and help regulate its functionality. The gut regulates water and electrolyte balance as well. As I said before, it houses 70 to 80% of the immune system, and it connects and communicates directly to the brain. That's why people say, I have a gut feeling, or I got a gut feeling. That feeling, listen to it, by the way. Your gut feeling is usually right. But the gut communicates to the brain through the vagus nerve, a very important communication sequence. And so what you eat is also what you think. And that's very, very important to understand, because when you have gut dysbiosis, many people struggle around getting their autoimmune disease under control because of their food cravings. They have cravings for sweets or sugars or processed foods. And this has to do with the gut. It has to do with the milieu, or the microbiome in the gut. Certain microbes will hijack your vagus nerve, send messages down it to your brain, make you crave the things that they want but that aren't good for you, because if you feed them, they grow and continue to prosper. Whether you prosper or not is not their concern. So keep that in mind. Your gut is going to be a very, very important part of the process of resolving autoimmunity. And there's 5 gut firewalls. If you look at this diagram here, the first is called the GALT, the gastro-associated lymphoid tissue. This is your immune system. This is what I was referring to. 70-80% of your immune system, that's that. You also have these little unique protein barriers in your gut called tight junctions. Now, these prevent your gut from leaking. So these are anchors that reside between gut cells that keep those gut cells from separating or splitting open, allowing for the contents of your gut to spill into the paracellular space between gut cells and then subsequently make it into your bloodstream. You also have something called mucosal IgA. This is a specialized antibody that acts like a police force in your gut, or handcuffs, if you will. These IgA antibodies will bind to all different types of toxins and other chemical exposures that you might come across and prevent them from being absorbed into your bloodstream. They will bind to them, and then you're allowed then to poop them out. Then we have the friendly bacteria. The friendly bacteria play numerous roles in regulating our gut health. Aside from helping us make vitamins, they help us digest our food, but these friendly bacteria also can process chemicals and detoxify toxins and put them into your stool and help your body poop them out. So the friendly microflora is very, very important. Many people who have a history of antibiotic use or have a history of antibiotic exposures, whether it's through chlorine or fluorines or other things in the environment, have a diminished flora, and this is part of their problem. This is one of the triggers, right, that opens that gut lining and can trigger autoimmunity. And then we also have the stomach acid. The stomach acid is super important, and the reason it gets on the top 5, there are more firewalls in the gut than these 5, but these are the top 5. But the reason we put acid in the top 5 is because so many of you are taking antacids. Drugs like Prilosec and Nexium, and even the Tums and the Rolaids that you pop before the food that you know is going to upset your stomach. Look, those things block your acid, and the job of stomach acid is to destroy and kill unfriendly microorganisms that you might get by eating your food. The other job of that stomach acid is to break down and help you digest protein. Protein is what your immune system is made out of. The antibodies and the other proteins that you get from the food that you eat go into the functionality of your immune system. So if you're blocking stomach acid on a regular basis, you're going to suffer protein malabsorption and malnutrition, and it's going to affect you in many, many ways. So stomach acid, very, very critical. Okay, let's move on to what I call the 4 horsemen of the GI apocalypse. You see in this diagram chemicals. And again, that could be in your food. This is why we try to eat chemical-free as much as possible. Gluten, microbial imbalance, and medication. When you add these 4 horsemen together, they can create a synergism that can cause and drive perpetual GI damage and intestinal permeability. Now, that intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut, has triggers. This is an example. If you look at this diagram, these are known causes of leaky gut. As you can see here, gluten can cause it. We know this thanks to the work of Harvard researcher Alessio Fasano. GMO foods, plastics. How many of you eat out of plastics, eat off of plastics, eat with plastic silverware, drink out of plastic bottles, rub plastics on your face through cosmetics and other things? Plastics are no good. Pesticides, aggressive exercise. Now I say aggressive exercise, not moderate exercise, aggressive exercise. We see this a lot in athletes where they're exercising super heavy and they start getting sick as a result, and this can be one of the triggers. We know that many medications can drive leaky gut. Infection can drive leaky gut. Food allergies and sensitivities can drive leaky gut. There's another example food there, potatoes. There was a study done years ago on a particular alkaloid in potatoes in some people, not in all, but in some, causing leaky gut. It's an example there. And the reason I don't want to scare people away from potatoes, I have this on this diagram to predominantly give you the example that different foods can cause leaky gut for different people. And one of the elements here that you want to take away is if you suspect food as a trigger for yourself, you most likely want to consider food sensitivity, food allergy testing to get a better understanding of what your food triggers are. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, you see this diagram here on leaky gut. Leaky gut occurs when tight junctions are damaged. Those tight junctions are damaged by many different things. But once they're damaged, chemicals and toxins can access your bloodstream. This can lead to immune abnormalities, increases the development of food allergy, one of the things we call acquired food response or acquired food allergy, and that can drive the process of autoimmunity. Let's take a deeper look at medicine. So if you look at this diagram, notice there's an action item above on the right. It says get with your doctor ASAP. So if you're on these classes of medications, you see on the far left, these are common drugs that impact gastrointestinal function. Antibiotics destroy the health of gut bacteria. That can increase the risk of infection, hinder digestion and vitamin synthesis. That can contribute to leaky gut or permeability. And subsequently, we can get things like IBS, nutritional deficiencies, and the development of autoimmunity. If you look under pain medications, and this is even true of over-the-counter medicines, but ibuprofen, aspirin, naproxen, erode any NSAID, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, can erode the mucosal lining of the stomach and upper small intestine. I mean, aspirin, baby aspirin, in doses 1/10 of a baby aspirin can cause microbleeding and mucosal erosion in your stomach. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of doctors are just saying, take the aspirin. But it has tremendous impact on gut function. So if you're on aspirin or if you're on pain relievers on a regular basis, understand that you're eroding your mucosal lining and you're creating a roadmap to intestinal permeability, subsequently autoimmune disease. Look at the next class, acid reflux. I mentioned this a moment ago, but when you inhibit or lower stomach acid function, you inhibit or hinder digestion of nutrients like protein, calcium, and vitamin B12. This leads to weakened immunity, depression, bone loss, and many other problems. And then antidepressants. They alter gut motility. They contribute to constipation. They alter gut flora and increase toxic colon burden. And this is, again, folks, this is just an example. This is by no means, this diagram is not meant to represent all medications. My point is if you're taking chronic medications, understand how they can affect your gut and make sure you have that conversation with your prescriber or do your research. Come back to my show. Every Tuesday we have a show and every Thursday we have a live Q&A. Bring me your questions. I'm happy to help guide you in the right direction in this area. So home-based action steps around this. So we're talking about leaky gut. and intestinal dysbiosis. Consider intermittent fasting. Can be very, very helpful to help the gut heal and reseal the lining. Avoid all grains, all dairy, all legumes and nightshades immediately. In essence, follow no grain, no pain, the diet. If you haven't read my book, please do. There's a diet plan in that. Follow it. Eliminate processed or packaged food items immediately. Consume easy-to-digest foods, initially soups, broths, fermented foods. Perform controlled deep breathing before your meals and eat in a peaceful, calm place. When you're eating, eat. When you're eating, you shouldn't be distracted by stressful news channels. You shouldn't be distracted by all other nefarious things in the environment. You should be sitting at peace, because the act of eating is a parasympathetic act. We want to be at rest so that we maximize the blood flow to our digestive tract and therefore get the best nutrition that we can. Pay attention to your GI's communication with you. In other words, don't ignore the symptoms. If you eat something and your gut hurts, that's your gut's way of saying stop it. Listen to that message. Maintain adequate water. Water helps you digest your food. When you're eating a meal, it's important that if you're drinking water with that meal, some people will tell you that water dilutes your digestive enzymes and don't take water with food. I don't agree with that. I don't see that clinically as a problem. But what we do see clinically as a problem is people who drink ice water or iced beverages with a meal. When you ice your gut, you restrict the blood flow to it. Just like when you ice a joint that hurts, you restrict the blood flow. That's how it blocks pain, is it by blocking blood flow. So room temperature beverages is ideal when you're trying to eat. Keep the bowels moving naturally. If necessary, consider a probiotic. Magnesium is helpful. High-dose vitamin C can be helpful to move your bowels. Digestive enzymes, apple cider vinegar, acid or bile supplements are sometimes very helpful, especially for those of you who maybe have your gallbladder removed. Consider a bile acid supplement to help you digest better or to support your digestion of fats. Pay very close attention to foods high in FODMAPs, oxalates, and histamines. These are common additional trigger foods that develop with leaky gut and intestinal dysbiosis. So just put those on your radar of things to investigate. And then be cautious of supplements containing GMO or other taboo ingredients. I see this a lot where people are trying to take the magnesium or the vitamin C to improve their bowel movement, but the products that they're using contain, horrendous fillers and chemicals. And so now, they're just adding more fuel potentially to the fire. So if you are using supplements as support, read that label carefully. And then action steps around working with a functional doctor. Have functional GI testing performed. There are a number of different ways to measure the GI tract, how it functions, how it works. You can measure the microbiome. You can measure digestive enzyme production. You can measure inflammatory markers. You can measure signs of disruption that might be a clue or an insight and might give that doctor the ability to help you make a better decision or even treat you better. Rule out GI imbalances or dysbiosis. That's another benefit to doing testing, right? So you can rule out yeast overgrowth or bacterial, gram-negative bacteria overgrowths, parasites, viral issues. Consider biofilms. A lot of times bacteria will thrive in the GI tract and create a chronic problem. There are a number of different gram-negative bacteria. Yeast can do it too, but that can drive autoimmune disease. Bacteria like Pseudomonas and Klebsiella are common examples, Citrobacter, that we have seen time and again cause an immune response against the joints and against muscles, so creating, in essence, an autoimmune response against your own physical structure, leading to chronic pain. So these bacteria thrive under biofilms. Think of a biofilm as like a dome that these bacteria produce to surround their colonies, to hide from your immune system. And so biofilms are sometimes a impediment to treatment. So talk to your doctor about that potential. If you've already been treated for these types of dysbiotic microorganisms and the treatment's not working, have that conversation about biofilm with your doctor. Assessing, as mentioned, assessing the microbiome, assess production of acid, digestive enzymes, short-chain fatty acids, and immune components like IgA. You can assess GI inflammatory markers. And depending on the extent of damage, you may need a supplemental source of immunoglobulins. You can assess nutrients. The gut will never heal if you're deficient in nutrients like vitamin A, L-glutamine, vitamin C, zinc, B12, and folate. These are nutrients that are necessary to repair the gut lining if it's damaged. So this goes back to what we originally talked about as a trigger, nutritional deficiencies. So they overlap. A lot of these things overlap, as you'll see as we go through this. The next story of hope I'd love to share with you is an amazing recovery of a past patient of mine named Amy. She had severe joint pain and neurological damage. It was so bad it was actually affecting her hearing. And by finding the right trigger, she was able to make a full recovery. Here's her story.
I started seeing Dr. Osborne about 6 years ago. Before that, I had spent 2 or 3 years experiencing a lot of joint pain and a progressive hearing loss. The joint pain in my hips was severe enough that I couldn't sit cross-legged on the floor. I couldn't walk down the stairs comfortably. I would clutch the handrail for additional support. For 3 or 4 years, slowly, my hearing had started getting worse. And you don't notice at first. You think someone at the end of the table is just mumbling, or you think it's that individual person just never speaks up. But eventually you notice that it's you, not anybody else. And so I started going to an audiologist to get my hearing checked. My general practitioner sent me to an ENT to also check my hearing, and she checked it, couldn't find anything that was causing the hearing loss. But every 6 months when I would go to the audiologist, my hearing loss would be worse. And so I had a friend of each thing that you have that you treat, but it's amazing in your body how many things are impacted by your nutritional levels, by your hormone levels, by things like parasitic infections or other infections that you can have in your body as well. And all those can be detected using functional medicine. It's the difference that you notice between working with traditional medicine and working with Dr. Osborne is the time that he spends with you. He spends a great deal of time understanding what your symptoms are, talking through them, listening to you. And then you start a process of testing anything that is suspect that could be wrong in your body, whether it's nutritional deficiencies, infections, you talk about stress, you talk about hormones, you talk about anything that can be out of balance. Where with traditional medicine, if a pharmaceutical will hide these symptoms, your doctor pretty much considers you done. That's it. But you don't spend that time really digging into the issues and what's causing your symptoms and why you're sick. I think the biggest thing that surprised me with functional medicine was, even though it takes a while, it's the personalized attention that it gives you. And the fact that we spent several years doing additional testing, talking about my symptoms, trying to figure out what it might be. And it's not a fast solution, but it's a much more thorough solution. Working with Dr. Osborne obviously gave me the chance to save my hearing, which is a life changer, right? But also it gives me the hope that through the rest of my life, I have a tool now to manage my health. And I don't have to rely on pharmaceuticals, and I don't have to accept that symptoms are just because I'm getting older. I have a resource to go to that's going to work through those symptoms and keep me healthy and feeling good and active the rest of my life.
Okay, let's move into food. So you want to screenshot this. Gluten sensitivity, food, and chemical allergies are the next topic that I want to dive into. So let's talk about gluten. And I want to spend a little bit of time on gluten because, as I mentioned earlier, it's the most well-studied and most well agreed upon cause or contributing factor in autoimmune disease. Now, a lot of people have turned their attention to glyphosate, and I'm not saying that glyphosate doesn't also contribute to autoimmune disease. I believe it does. But gluten also does. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, just eat the bread from Italy, or just buy organic, or just grind your own bread at home. And the problem here is, if you have autoimmune disease and you're hypersensitized to gluten, those things aren't going to fix that hypersensitization. You really want to eliminate it regardless of the source, whether it's produced with glyphosate or whether it's not. And if we look at the history of celiac disease, we know that even if you just look in the last 100 years, people were developing inflammatory bowel disease the moment cereal was invented. And this was in the late 1800s, 1890s, where Post and Kellogg produced, the original cereals, and then it's evolved from there, but we saw many doctors documented the rise of intestinal inflammatory diseases once cereal became more and more common in the modern diets. So this was long before glyphosate was ever introduced or ever brought into the scene. So the glyphosate's use has really only been limited to in our major food crops since the 1990s. So we go back, further than that. In the early 1900s, all the way up through the 1970s, we saw a meteoric rise in autoimmune disease and intestinal inflammation as a result of high levels of grain consumption. So don't rule out the gluten. Many of you who have kind of written it off and ordered your grain from Europe, be careful, because it can, and I've seen it do this in many people, it can perpetuate your autoimmune disease. Okay, gluten was the first medically proven cause of autoimmunity. All grains contain some form of gluten. As you can see this diagram to the right, prolamine fraction of proteins in grains. Prolamine fractions are gluten. So if you look at wheat, for example, the name of one of the types of gluten found in wheat is called gluten, and it represents 69% of the total protein found in wheat. You can see some of the other grains and the types of gluten they contain, and what I really want you to pay attention to are some of these that are commonly labeled gluten-free in the grocery store. Oats. How many times have you seen a box of gluten-free oats? But oats aren't gluten-free. They contain a form of gluten called avenin, and it's 12 to 16% of the total protein of oats. Researchers have shown that avenin can cause inflammatory damage to people with gluten sensitivity, so you got to be careful there with those labels. Millet is commonly labeled as gluten-free, but you can see millet contains a form of gluten called panisin, 40% of the total protein. Corn contains a gluten called zein, 55%. Rice contains a gluten called orzonin, 5%. Sorghum contains a gluten called cafrin, 52% of the total protein. So bookmark this page. Many of you are buying gluten-free products over the counter on the gluten-free food aisle, and you're not getting better, and you're like, I went gluten-free, it didn't work for me. And reality is you went what we call traditional gluten-free. You went wheat, barley, and rye-free, but you didn't go true gluten-free. You didn't avoid all the grains. All grains, by definition, contain gluten. The definition of gluten is that it's the family of proteins found in the seeds of grass soluble in alcohol. And all grains contain different forms of gluten, period. So keep that in mind. Testing antibodies to gluten, it can be misleading. Because gluten can cause antibody suppression. So many people with gluten issues don't make adequate antibodies. So if you're using antibodies to measure a response, you can get a false normal or a false negative because your antibody levels overall are low. So you have to be careful. A lot of doctors out there doing gluten antibody testing, and when the test comes back negative, not considering that. So it's one of the ways to get a misleading diagnosis. Understand that gluten sensitivity is not a disease, it's a genetic predisposition. There are gene markers that can be measured that can help you understand whether or not you are predisposed to react to gluten. And so if you have those markers, ideally you don't want to consume gluten. Those genetics are called HLA-DQ genes. If you're wondering, there's HLA-DQ alpha-1 and HLA-DQ beta-1 genes. Those can be tested. If this is the first time you're hearing of it, I apologize. Because if you've ever had a conversation with gluten with another doctor and they didn't give this information to you, they should have. But if you want to learn more about genetic testing for gluten sensitivity, we'll put a link below as well, and you can learn and read more about genetic testing. But ideally, if you really want to know whether or not you are predisposed to react to gluten, you should get a genetic test done. Let's take a deeper look at gluten here. You can see gluten sensitivity. Most people think that celiac disease and gluten sensitivity are the same thing, and in fact, they're not. Gluten sensitivity is a genetic predisposition. People that have that genetic predisposition and eat gluten anyway can develop celiac disease. So we could make the statement that everyone with celiac disease is gluten sensitive, but not everybody with gluten sensitivity will develop celiac disease. Gluten can cause more than just celiac disease, though, and I think it's important that you understand that. The scope of autoimmune conditions that have been linked to gluten is enormous. And if you haven't seen my series on gluten specifically, it's 14 hours long when I go into super mega depth on that. It's called Glutenology, and you can check that out at glutenology.net. I encourage you to watch that if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty of the science. But this simple diagram here shows you that gluten sensitivity can lead to bone loss, to asthma, to fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, to thyroid disease, to psychological diseases like bipolar, and inflammatory brain conditions like depression, and also schizophrenia, or bread madness as it was once called. We know that gluten can cause lymphoma or different types of cancers. Gluten's actually linked to 11 different types of cancer. And so it's not just about celiac disease. Celiac disease is not a worse manifestation. It's not more problematic than gluten sensitivity. I would argue that they're all bad. Celiac is just one of many ways gluten sensitivity can manifest in a person, and understand it that way, and you won't get stuck in that celiac rut. Now, these are some examples of primary and secondary effects of gluten exposure. So for those of you with genetic predisposition, you eat gluten, primary effects can be the development of barrier permeability. We know that gluten causes a disruption in the tight junctions of the GI tract, leading to leaky gut. Subsequently, it can also create barrier permeability of the blood-brain barrier. This is why gluten's been linked to diseases like cerebellar ataxia and schizophrenia and epilepsy and neuropathy. It's because gluten can damage the blood-brain barrier. We know that as a primary effect, gluten can cause and drive autoimmune disease, such as celiac and Hashimoto's and ankylosing spondylitis. We know that as a primary effect, gluten can cause gut dysbiosis. It can alter the milieu of the types of bacteria that live in the GI tract. We know that for many, gluten can drive an IgE response. Many people that react to it also develop what we call an acute allergy. We know that it can also create a delayed antibody response. So you can have both an acute response, meaning an IgE antibody reaction, or you could have a delayed response, such as an IgG or an IgA or an IgM reaction. So these are all primary effects that gluten can trigger problems in humans. And then there's secondary effects. If you look on the left-hand or the right-hand side of this diagram, secondary effects would be things like the nutritional deficiencies that are caused by the gut damage gluten induces. And once you start developing those nutritional deficiencies, now your health can really deteriorate, because what did we say earlier about nutrients? They're fundamental to your health. They're fundamental to healing and repair and maintenance of the body. We know that secondary effects are also systemic inflammation. Once gluten gets in, it can drive systemic inflammation throughout your body, basically creating organ and tissue damage. And this puts a burden on the body, right? It creates what we call a repair deficit, where your body is breaking down faster than it can heal and repair itself. And so this is when your tissues start to break down. This is when symptoms start to coalesce and conform into either a syndrome or a diagnosis that a doctor wants to give you. So that's that chronic exposure over time that leads to that chronic inflammation over time that leads to the disease. Now, beyond gluten, I think it's important to bring the topic of grains into this equation. If you aren't familiar with my book, No Grain, No Pain, get familiar with it. It's been published in 5 different languages. It's available at every major book retailer. PBS ran a special on it, but it's a very important indexed guide to help you navigate diet through autoimmune disease. I mean, we've had thousands and thousands of people all over the world write in saying, No Grain, No Pain changed my life. No Grain, No Pain put my autoimmune disease into remission. If there was the one simple key tool that you would walk away today, spending the least amount of money, because you can check this out at the library, you don't even have to buy a copy, and I don't care whether you buy it or not. It's not going to matter on my bank account. It's all about helping you get the information that you need to recover. But when it comes to grain, look at this funnel. My publisher wanted me to call this book, he wanted to put a gluten in the title, but I didn't want to put gluten in the title. I wanted to put grain in the title, because grain is more than gluten. Gluten is just one aspect of grain that can be detrimental and drive autoimmunity. But if you look at the funnel there, grains also contain heavy metals. They contain excessive omega-6. They drive leaky gut. Grains are excessive carbohydrate. They contain, many of them are GMO or contain pesticides. Grains are contaminated by mold and mycotoxins. Grains contain chemicals called ATIs, that stands for amylase trypsin inhibitors. These are chemicals that can activate the immune system regardless of gluten. They activate little receptors in your immune system called TLR4 receptors that drive inflammation. This has all been well documented and studied. I published it in the book and discussed it in depth. But understand that when you eat grain, it comes with all those things. And if you're trying and struggling with a chronic autoimmune inflammatory disorder, the name of the game is remove the bad and provide the good. We're trying to remove the triggers of the autoimmune condition and the inflammation while we give the body what it needs to heal and repair. And so no grain, no pain is kind of a benchmark to help you begin that process. More on sensitivities and allergies. You can be allergic or sensitive to any food. It's not just gluten and grains, but I've seen cases, if you read my book, one of the stories is a little girl named Ginger. She was reactive to blueberries, and she had a terminal diagnosis. I mean, we saved her life, and she didn't end up dying, but blueberries was a big trigger for her. And it can be any food. Any food, there's an old adage, one man's food is another man's poison. You can acquire an allergy or a sensitivity to any food. That's why it's important to get these things measured. You can also have reactions to chemicals, and there are chemicals in your food, the additives, the pesticides, preservatives, dyes. There's a lot going on in the world right now where they're trying to get dyes out of the food, and that's great. It's a great first step. But really, we have to be more adamant about getting all this nonsense out of our foods. There's petro-based plastics and microplastics in foods. There's environmental molds that people can also have sensitivities to, not so much food-related, but you can inhale or be exposed to those through air. And then there's metal compounds, toxic metals, things like cadmium and cadmium and arsenic and mercury and aluminum. And then there's also compounds found in medicines as well as in dental or surgical implants from a metal perspective. But I've seen cases where people were reacting to their implants. You know, if you've heard of breast implant disease, and I've had people that were reacting to hardware. I had one woman one time, she had a few different screws put into her ankle, and she began reacting to the metal alloy in those screws. She actually started forming an autoimmune reaction around those. And ultimately, we tested her and discovered it, and we were able to get our surgeon to accommodate her, and her autoimmune disease, improved dramatically after taking those foreign elements out of her body. So keeping in mind that autoimmune disease has triggers, going back to what we're dealing with. Allergic reactions, there's a term here. If you look at this diagram, what most of you know about from an allergic response is this. If you look on the left of this diagram, it's IgE antibodies. So if you've ever been to an allergist and they've drawn your blood, they've more than likely they've measured IgE response. If they've done a skin patch test or prick test on you, they're measuring IgE responses. Now, that's what we call an acute allergy, and that type of reaction is generally it's labeled acute because it has a window of immediate to as latent as 3 hours, meaning so from immediate exposure to up to 3 hours, you can start having a reaction against something that's IgE mediated. That's what we call acute. And that's typically the classic symptoms of that are like your lips swell, your throat constricts, you get hives on your skin, you break out with urticarial wheals, you might have wheezing in your lungs, you might get watery, teary, itchy eyes or runny nose, the classic allergy symptoms. But we also have in that same category, you have something called a subacute, which is where it's not quite an anaphylactic or super strong reaction, it's a little bit milder, and this is where things like your blood pressure might go up, or your heart rate might go up, because it drives the process of creating adrenaline, and adrenaline is a stress hormone that can elevate blood pressure and can elevate heart rate and can make kids, we see this a lot with kids, it can make them hyperactive because they're pumping, they just ate something they're allergic to and now they're making all this adrenaline and their energy goes through the roof and they can't sit down in school. Those are all acute and subacute. Now look at the right of this diagram and you're going to see a term that you may not have ever heard of. It's called delayed hypersensitivity. Now this has a window of 3 hours to 3 weeks. So you can eat or be exposed to things that you have a delayed response to, and the window of inflammatory reaction is just much longer. And so there are examples of delayed reactions. There are T-cell responses. You can see in the middle the IgG, IgA, IgM antibody responses, and then also the immune complex responses. But look where they all lead. They all lead to the same consequence, which is chemical inflammation, tissue damage, subsequently disease. And in this case, what we're talking about is autoimmune disease. Now, from the perspective of testing, IgE is what most doctors test or measure. So if you've had allergy testing, that's most likely what you've had done. But ideally, you want to get those other things measured as well. You want to get that delayed response testing done. I've seen cases where that saves a person's life. As I mentioned Ginger earlier, she had a delayed response to blueberries, not an acute response, and wouldn't have been found on an IgE, on a standard IgE test. So these are things I want you guys to make sure, these are things that can be measured, quantified, objectified, so that you can be empowered to change your diet. Because that's what it's about, right? How do we find a way to remove your triggers? Well, if we can test for what they are, then we can empower you to remove them, and we're taking away something that's driving the damage, driving the inflammation. So I mentioned these already, and you want to take a snap of this screen here, but acute and subacute responses. Shock, hives, swollen lips and face, coughing, wheezing, sneezing, runny nose, excessive mucus, watery, itchy eyes, elevated pulse, increased blood pressure, erratic mood change. Notice on the picture here, this is actually a client in my office, developing tonsil stones. It's a common symptom of allergies. So if you open your mouth and say, ah, and you've got those little white pus pockets in your tonsils, or those little rocks sitting in your tonsils, you definitely want to consider that you're having food reactions. And as I mentioned, the hidden immune burdens, the delayed responses have a time framing of 3 hours to 3 weeks. Symptoms may not even be noticeable, but there's still a burden on your immune system because they're driving underlying inflammation and immune dysregulation. And that's what's important to take away. That's why they're called delayed response. You don't always notice them. They're not always obvious. And it's very, very common for people with compromised immune systems and pre-existing autoimmune disease to have collected multiple forms of delayed responses to foods. So here's your home-based action steps from this section. Number 1, read No Grain, No Pain and apply the 30-day diet plan immediately. Perform a food elimination diet. This is something else you can do that can, low budget, no budget, very simple. Just diary the food that you're eating and diary your symptoms. And if you find any potential matches, consistently remove those foods. Eliminate as many toxic exposures from your environment as possible. Try to avoid foods that have pesticides in them. Avoid the household cleaning products with all the chemicals. Buy natural cleaning products and soaps and shampoos, etc. Beware that many chemicals can come from, and I'm going to let you read that line just so that we don't get this thing taken down. And then begin reading all food and other household labels. Learn what you're putting in and on your body. Don't just put your head in the sand. Become an advocate for yourself. It's funny how many times I hear people say, don't eat bananas, it's got too much sugar and you'll be a diabetic. And at the same time, they'll drink a soda, or at the same time, they'll smother some lotion on their face that has 35 petrochemicals in it without giving cause or pause for concern. So learn to read labels and learn what they mean. Pay attention to how you feel after eating. Pay attention to how you feel after being exposed to chemicals and soaps and hygiene products. If you get a migraine headache every morning after your shower, look at your shampoo, look at your perfumes, look at your cosmetics. If you have changed your diet and you're already following No Grain, No Pain and you're completely not responding, meaning you've done it and it's not working. We get this sometimes where people have changed their diet and are like, oh, Dr. Osborne, I followed your book, followed your plan, and I just didn't get better. If that's you, consider mold. This is the second most common autoimmune trigger we see clinically. And when I talk about mold, I mean environmental mold. A lot of people have a hard time with this one because they can't, it's hard to fathom that your house might be growing mold and actually killing you, especially if the mold isn't obviously visible. But if you've ever had a roof leak or a pipe bust or water damage in your house, even if it was remediated, even if it was dried out properly, and shortly thereafter, months after that happened, you developed an autoimmune disease and you're like, why did this happen? Or if you've ever moved into a home that has a history of water damage, or moved into a place and it smells a little musty, maybe it's an apartment, and you smell mustiness in the closet, or you smell mustiness in a room, like that's mold. That's mold or other microbes growing on water-damaged building materials. And if you are diet compliant and doing everything well there, you definitely want to rule mold out. There's a few things that you can do to do that. One would be to perform an ERMI test where you live. An ERMI test is a special dust collection that measures for mold spore counts in the dust in your home. You can also consider hiring a forensic mold investigator, somebody who knows what they're doing. And if you're going to go that route, please, please, please go and read my article on how to hire a mold inspector. And you can see there I put the website up on the slide for you. It's moldjacked.com, because this is where a lot of people fail, is they get a mold inspector to come out, and the mold inspector is a moron, had a 2-day training course, doesn't understand mold, doesn't know how to look for mold, but they do an air test. Air tests are not accurate mold assessments. So if you've had somebody come out and do an air test and it came back negative, it doesn't mean you don't have mold. Keep that in mind for those of you who have changed your diet and struggle, look and think mold. Okay, moving on away from mold, other home things that you can do to reduce your chemical burden: install air and water filtration systems. When it comes to air, here's some options. You can do UV light, you can do HEPA, carbon, air reactors and ionizers. These are all good options. If you're on a budget and you're trying to pick an option that's the most affordable and the most effective, go with HEPA. And you can find HEPA filters at local department stores. So this is not a hard thing to get, and it's not a super expensive thing to get. And if you have a bigger budget, talk to the air guy about bigger things, because air quality is one of the conundrums to chronic autoimmune conditions. We know air quality causes asthma and other autoimmune problems on a regular basis, so improving the air quality in your home is very important. According to the EPA, some houses are 100 times more polluted inside than the outdoor air. So take care of your air. Water filter options. I like whole house softeners depending on how hard your water is, but softeners usually also come with what's known as GAC, which is granular activated carbon. This is a nice carbon filter. Carbon removes a lot of the chemicals. And then something called KDF, that's kinetic degradation fluxion. This is a zinc and copper alloy that removes a number of chemicals from water. And then another option is reverse osmosis. And then for RO, drinking and cooking, if you live in the city, I recommend people living in the city look at RO as their option for cooking water and drinking water, simply because the carbon and KDF filters don't remove fluoride as efficiently or effectively, but RO does. And so if you're in the city, not on a well, if you're on a well, don't worry about reverse osmosis. But if you're in the city, consider an RO filter for your drinking water. And then also, if you don't have a whole house filter, maybe you're putting a filter on your drinking water, and think about your shower water. You bathe in hot water, and if it's got chlorine and chloramines and fluoride and all other nefarious chemicals, filter that stuff out the best that you can. Attach a shower head filter. They make granular activated carbon KDF shower head attachments that are really inexpensive, somewhere in the $50 to $80 range. So it's not super duper expensive. You just have to make sure you change those filters out periodically, because the water usage does deplete their effectiveness. Consider this: toxic compounding. We're exposed to 4 billion prescription drugs in the U.S. each year. That's how much is ingested. And a lot of those unmetabolized drugs come out in the urine and in our city water supply. And in Houston, where I live, 42 prescription drugs were identified in the water after the city had filtered the water. And this is a while back. This isn't even new. I imagine if we measured today, it'd probably be a lot higher. But if you live in a major metropolitan area, the reality is you're probably going to have prescription drugs in your water. 70,000 chemicals are used commercially. 3,000 chemicals are added to our food supply. 10,000 chemicals are used in food processing, preserving, and storage. The EPA estimates that our homes are now 5 to 100 times more toxic than outdoor air. So this is what I mean by toxic compounding. we're being bombarded by things that we are ingesting, whether it's through eating or through air or through exposure, and our bodies are overwhelmed, our immune systems are overwhelmed, and we want to do everything we can to mitigate and minimize this exposure. So if you think about this toxic exposure, think of it like a bucket. You have so much room in your bucket, and when your bucket's full and it overflows, that leads to or contributes to dysfunction and disease. And it's at that point, that's dysfunction is what symptoms are. This is when patients go see their doctor, and then their doctor, just what do? They just give them a medication. They say, oh, you have this symptom, here's the drug that you take for this symptom, or here's the diagnosis, here's the drug you take for this diagnosis. And so all you're really doing is adding one more thing to your toxic bucket, because there's a cost for every medication. Medications don't create health. Medications suppress symptoms. They can improve quality of life, but shouldn't be your long-term strategy if you're trying to really heal. So again, hopefully this visual helps you better understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect you from an overburdened toxic load so that your body can get the nutrients it needs to heal and repair and maintain itself and express good health. Okay, action steps. I mentioned those were action steps earlier. Just do it yourself at home. These are action steps you can ask a functional medicine doctor about. Number one is ask for HLA-DQ testing for gluten-sensitive gene patterns. It's very easy to do. If your doctor won't do it, go to Gluten-Free Society. We offer that as well as a resource for those of you looking to get tested when you have stubborn doctors. Test your blood for acute allergies. That type of test is called IgE testing. And test for more than the traditional 8 allergens. Most doctors, when they run that test, will measure for the top 8, things like wheat and soy and dairy, etc. But you want to test comprehensively. Don't just test for the top 8. Test your immune system for delayed hypersensitivity responses. This can give you tremendous insight. And I've had cases that were just really, really stubborn cases where once we knew their delayed responses, like it was the big shift that the person needed to completely make a turnaround. The amount of times that I've heard a patient tell me, Dr. Osborne, I can't believe that I was allergic to almonds. It's such a strange thing to be reactive to. And I was drinking almond milk in my coffee every day, and I was using almond flour to make my gluten-free substitute bread. And 3 days after I cut the almonds out, my joints quit hurting. Like, I hear stories like that all the time. And the reason I do is we do testing in my practice. We test people for these things. So get the knowledge so that you have it, so that you can be empowered to make meaningful change to your diet without guessing, right? So if you're beyond the guessing stage, now many of you guess well and guess right, and this is no offense to any of you who have navigated this on your own, but one of the best ways, if you've navigated it on your own and you're still struggling, is to get the testing done so that you can get the knowledge you need to move forward in confidence. And if your test is positive for mold, consider the source may be coming from inside your home, your vehicle, or your work, and ask your doctor to do appropriate testing on you, on your body, for things like mycotoxins or antibodies to mold or mycotoxins, or other inflammatory marker tests or imaging tests that might also give insights or clues as to whether or not you may be being mold exposed. I once had a patient who was confined to a wheelchair with a severe form of ascending paralysis autoimmunity. It was affecting her nervous system. She was actually a pilot and lost her ability or lost her license to fly. But her story is such an amazing recovery, and I want to share that with you next.
Before my health took a nosedive, I was an airline pilot. I had pretty good health. I had battled with cancer once before in 1995, but it's been in remission, hadn't had any recurrences or anything. My health was relatively decent. I knew that I had some sort of food allergy, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. I had been to several doctors and no one had really agreed with what I thought it was. I kept a food journal, and I noticed that when I ate certain foods that it would make me feel really ill, you know, stomach ache and diarrhea. It seems like the more I got exposed to it, the worse I got, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I was in New York on an overnight, and I just decided, oh, I've got to have some Indian food, so I know I'll pay for this, but I know the symptoms won't be too bad. You know. I responded to that meal very drastically. I had a lot of discomfort. I was, doubled over in pain. I felt like I was cramping, like I was having a baby again. And I was just doubled over, just crying and like, oh my gosh, I'm about to die here. I thought I had food poisoning. Well, I got over that. Very next morning, I had numbness and tingling in my feet. And I was at work, I was supposed to fly, and this tingling sensation was at my toes. I'm like, this isn't right. Feels like my toes are numb, like I've been sitting on my leg for a couple hours. I got on a standby flight that evening and got an appointment the next day at my neurologist. He's like, okay, we've got to start medicine right away. I'm like, what's going on? Well, I had ascending paralysis. I was starting to slowly lose everything from the toes up. And we were trying to get it arrested, but we had no idea what was causing it. I thought that the food that I'd eaten the evening before had triggered it, but he didn't agree. I wound up fainting in my a different doctor's office. And I was in there because I had found a lump in my breast, and then come to find out, and it turned out it was breast cancer. November of 2011 is when I started having the ascending paralysis. By February of 2012, I was on a ventilator for 3 weeks in ICU. Then had a bilateral mastectomy then, and as soon as we got the cancer out, then I started improving, but very slowly, and it seemed like I was taking 2 steps forward, 1, 2, or 3 steps back, and it just could not seem to get out of the drain that I was in. I wound up having what looked like seizures, neurologic disturbances, and just could not figure out what it was. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, we've gone through all the cancer treatments, you've done a year's worth of chemo, this is all we can do for you. I wasn't going to be around in 6 months to a year if we didn't figure something out. I'm so grateful to have found this place.
Okay, let's move into environmental toxins. Heavy metals are a big part of environmental toxins that I think deserve some special attention. As you can see here, lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, fluoride, bromine, and chlorine. These are all toxic metals that can compete and displace minerals from binding sites and tissues, meaning that if you have a lot of lead exposure, it can cause disruption of your iron, of your calcium, of your magnesium, of your zinc. Metals, bad metals compete with good metals, and the more deficient you are in good minerals, the more apt you are to become metal toxic. So keep in mind that healthy nutrition, eating adequate amounts of healthy minerals, offers protection from the heavy metals. We're not going to escape the heavy metals with 100% degree of certainty because it's too widespread and there's too much use of them commercially in too many aspects of our life. But we can, the best defense is a good offense. Making sure you're well nourished in minerals is an important step in reducing your heavy metal burden. That being said, some of you still have the accumulation of metals. And so let's talk about some of these and the importance of their sources. So if we look at lead exposure, for example, we see a lot of recalls on products these days. Toys produced in China because of lead, lipstick and personal care products being recalled because of lead. Now, lead in city waters throughout North America, if you recall, Flint, Michigan, and the lead problems that were nationwide news not very long ago. This is beyond Flint, Michigan. It's not just Flint, Michigan. It's many old infrastructures in cities have lead solder in their pipes. Several potential additional sources from manufacturing, painted dishes, canned foods, imported candies. We've seen some companies doing lead testing on things like salts and chocolates and electrolytes. And so you've got to keep your eyes and ears open for it. And then, of course, air and water exposure, especially if you live in an industrialized area where there's a lot of industry or factories near your home that might be using toxic metals in part of their processing. Body accumulation is also something. If you grew up in the 50s through the 60s, we call that the lead generation. There was lead in the gasoline and lead in paints. And the problem with that is if you were getting exposure, you accumulated it over the course of your lifetime And that, where does lead accumulate? Mostly in your tissues, and it really accumulates in bone tissue. It's one of its favorite places. It will displace calcium from bone. And this is especially true of women who have osteoporosis or developing bone loss. It is that lead from their bone that's been stored over decades of historical exposure now starts to leach out as their bones are demineralizing through age and sedentary behavior and lack of activity, and so that lead's starting to show up again and become a toxic problem for them. We also know lead crosses the placenta, and so without detoxification or retoxification, it will take 4 generations to eliminate lead from our offspring. So this is a tremendous problem that we face, and so testing for it, in my opinion, becomes an important aspect of overcoming autoimmune disease. There's definite associations between it. Let's look at mercury. Dental amalgam fillings are the #1 source of daily exposure to inorganic mercury in the adult population, by far. Fish and seafood are a very distant second, as you can see there, and then air and water and other food, distant third and fourth, but it's the dental amalgam. So if you've got those silver fillings in your mouth and you have an autoimmune disease, consider them as a potential trigger, or one of your triggers, and definitely get with your doctor and ask for testing to determine whether or not you have an exposure to mercury that is driving up and potentiating autoimmunity. Silver amalgams and mercury. In 1988, scrap dental amalgam material was declared a hazardous waste by the EPA. OSHA has certain mandates present to handle amalgam fillings before going into and out of your mouth. The OSHA guidelines are such. Scrap amalgam must be stored in an unbreakable, tight sealed container away from heat. Use a no-touch technique for handling the amalgam. Store under liquid, preferably glycerin or photographic fixer solution. I mean, think about that. Those things are in your mouth. You're chewing with them. You're touching them with your tongue. And, if the dentist removes them, he can't use his fingers. He's got to be protected, and he's got to put it in an airtight, protected material container in order to dispose of it. Why was it ever allowed in the first place is really the question that we should be asking. But we can't go back in time and change that. But what we can do is get our mercury levels tested and get with a good biological dentist to remove those fillings. There's also some research showing that mercury is in corn syrup. And so we look at how many products now use corn syrup instead of the traditional sweetener cane sugar. Corn syrup has dominated the market for the last 30 years in the U.S. particularly, and there's mercury, or there can be mercury contamination in it. Fluoride is another one, and for the first time ever here this last year, government finally came out and reduced the fluoridation recommendations. I was surprised to see that. Happy to see it, but surprised too. But Americans are consuming too much fluoride. It's in large quantities in the municipal water supplies, toothpaste, mouthwash, and it can be found in other products as well, dental products. A lot of dental products aimed at cavity reduction or sensitive teeth have even extra fluoride in them, and you have to watch out for that. We see fluoride toxicity in patients all the time in my practice. The U.S. Department of Health plans to lower fluoride in the drinking water for the first time in 50 years, and that just happened. Studies show that fluoride is very damaging to the brain. Fluoride affects a section of the brain that regulates reactions to stressful circumstances, making human beings easier to control. In other words, some would argue that fluoride was there all along on purpose for that reason. I don't know that I can make that claim firsthand, but it wouldn't surprise me. Now I'm going to pause on this slide if you want to look at it. This is another source of metals, and this is actually taken from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control's website. It's just a screenshot of the excipients, and you can read that, screenshot it, and have a look for yourself. Here's part 2, and I'll pause here so you can also screenshot this image as well. So home-based action steps: removal of any obvious potential for exposure. Check your cosmetics, toothpaste, mouthwash, medications. Check, if you're buying if you've got kids and you're buying all the toys from China, reconsider that, especially if they're young kids that put the toys in their mouth. Pots, pans, or ceramic plates made in China are common contaminants for heavy metals. Excessive fish consumption, I'll let you read that next bullet. Install appropriate water filtration, and then rice consumption. One of the things that I wrote about in No Grain, No Pain extensively was the contamination of rice with arsenic and cadmium as metals. And so if you are consuming a lot of rice, maybe you're kind of on a no grain, no pain diet, but using rice as your main food, consider arsenic and cadmium as something that might be holding you back. And if you're going to work with a doctor, ask for these things: pre and post urine chelation challenge testing. This is to help you identify metal in your body. Mercury tri-testing for mercury. Urine halide testing can help you to determine whether you have bromine or fluoride toxicities. Certain therapies, infrared sauna can help. That increased sweating can help to basically detox these things out of the body. Some people talk with their doctors about different types of chelation, IV or oral, and then amalgam removal. If it's necessary or appropriate, talk to your dentist about it. And then detoxification support, especially if you're going in to do amalgam removal. We actually give our clientele a protocol. If they've got silver amalgams and they're going to get them removed, we actually give them a protocol to protect them during and after that surgery, just in case. Because most of the biological dentists know how to do it right. They'll dam the patient and they'll use special fans to reduce the potential for that mercury overexposure. But we like to flood our patients with chelating agents, mainly vitamin C. People don't realize vitamin C is great. It binds metals and pulls them out. But there are other things too that work for that are natural, like lipoic acid, during and after that surgery, just as barriers of protection. Okay, let's move on to the next section, microbial imbalances. Microbial imbalances can be localized or systemic. Some people call microbial imbalance infection, and we could say, I think we could say it this way: all infections are microbial imbalances, but not all microbial imbalances are really technically infections. Infections are what we would really typically consider to be acute, and typically manifest with acute symptoms. So like an acute infection, you might have a fever. Where we see infection would be places like urinary tract, upper respiratory, sinus. Sometimes you see skin and joint and intestinal infections as well. But again, they can be acute or chronic. And the primary drivers are yeast, bacteria, virus, and parasites. So these things can all be measured and analyzed by a good doctor. But microbial imbalances are a common trigger for molecular mimicry. And let me explain what that means. So molecular mimicry is when a toxin produced by a microbe, so for example, certain bacteria will make what are called endotoxins. Yeast will make what are called mycotoxins. And then viruses produce different toxins, different protein toxins, as do parasites. And so these toxins interact with your immune system. Sometimes these toxins can look like your tissues. So for example, sometimes we'll see gram-negative bacterial endotoxins that look like cartilage. And so initially the immune system going after this bacterial toxin will start looking at the joint cartilage and it will say, that joint cartilage looks an awful lot like that bacterial toxin. Let's go get the joint. And this is where molecular mimicry sets in. The molecule or the toxin produced by the microorganism looks like the human tissue of the body. And so the immune system starts to attack that human tissue, and that manifests as an autoimmune process. That whole scenario is called molecular mimicry, and this is where infections or dysbiosis or intestinal, not even just intestinal, but microbial imbalances can be part of this problem. So here's some common examples. In the sinuses, there's a type of multiple antibiotic-resistant staph called Marcons. It's very common, especially if you've had mold exposures. Yeast colonization of the sinuses are very common. In the GI tract, we see Candida or other yeast. You can see parasites, different types of worms and amoebas. You can see bacterial, gram-negative bacterial overgrowths like Pseudomonas and Klebsiella. H. pylori is another one. Many of you have heard of H. pylori before. We know that on the skin and nail beds, staph infections of the skin, yeast infections, herpes is a virus on the skin that manifests as shingles. So these are all examples of infections. And then systemically, things like Lyme. that can be a systemic infection driving a chronic inflammatory condition for people and driving autoimmunity. So again, this is not an inclusive list of everything. It's just common examples. A good functional doctor can navigate and help you walk through potentials for you. But these can be difficult to detect. So work with the doctor on this, as lab is crucial for understanding the right kinds of labs. Symptoms can vary greatly. I mean, I've seen cases with people, for example, with yeast overgrowth. Some people develop full-blown rheumatoid symptoms, and others don't. Others might just manifest as something much more nuanced and small. So one person's reaction to the exact same type of microbe might be very different than another's. So although symptoms play an important role, they don't always tell the picture specifically or perfectly. And this is, again, where lab testing can become very, very helpful. So here's some home-based action steps in this category. Good hygiene practices: wash your hands, wash your sheets and pillowcases often, avoid casual use of antibiotics to preserve your microbiome. Avoid popular public spaces where germs are easily spread. And it can't always be done, and if you're going to go into those places or if you frequent those places, you might consider supporting your immune system better with things like N-acetylcysteine, vitamin C, checking your nutrition status, and making sure your immune system has the nutrients, on staff to protect you. If a chronic infection is suspected, avoid, I'll let you read that yourself. You want to talk to your doctor about immune suppressing medications as well, and seek professional help. If you're working with a doctor, perform appropriate testing to help identify. There's certain tests. These are some examples. CBC with differential to analyze white blood cell patterns that can sometimes lead to clues around infection. Urinalysis, nasal cultures, GI cultures, special blood testing for antibodies and other immune-mediating compounds can all be helpful for your doctor to understand these things. Always ask your doctor to differentiate before accepting broad-spectrum antibiotics. I see that a lot of doctors want to give antibiotics just in case. Like if you're going, let's just use it just in case. Don't do that. Like, ask them to differentiate. Ask them to justify the need for that, because they're not a harmless drug, and they're overused and they can create big problems. But ask your doctor for a culture sensitivity test. If they're trying to give you an antibiotic and they don't, it's different if you're in the hospital and you're about to die and they're just trying to save your life. If it's a chronic situation and you're not sure, ask for that test, ask for that culture. Because antibiotics oftentimes are given and the person getting the antibiotic already has a yeast infection, and the antibiotics can exacerbate that. That's one of the more common patterns that we see, where people take the antibiotic and have a negative consequential side effect to it because they didn't need it, because it was the wrong treatment. Okay, let's move into physical structure around autoimmune disease. So physical issues, as I mentioned earlier, very, very critical. So examples of structural issues: obesity. This is epidemic. I think at last check, it was like 60% of the U.S. population is obese. It's unacceptable. Obesity is not genetic. It's not a hormone issue. Obesity is a lifestyle issue. And this is not to say that those of you who are obese did it to yourself purposefully knowing it. This is simply to say, a lot of the guidance and the advice that's been out there for the last 40 years has led you to a path of obesity. The marketers have led you down that road. They've led you to believe that certain things are safe and certain things are okay around your diet and your lifestyle that aren't. So at this point, you have to acknowledge that you are where you're at if you're obese. And if that's the case, it's time to make changes. But it's not, I want you to understand, you're not obese because you've got bad genes. You're not obese because you've got a hormone problem. There's a solution to this. Anyway, scoliosis is another example of structural issues. And this is one that isn't always fixable. Depending on the type, if you've got a congenital scoliosis, these can be very detrimental to a person and can create a lot of neurological dysfunction and a lot of physical deformity dysfunction. Muscle spasm, this is more of a mild one, right? Maybe you sit at a desk at work all day and you lean to the left or to the right, and you've got imbalanced muscles, and so you deal with a lot of spasm because of your sedentary workload. Or maybe you're just dehydrated and you don't have enough electrolytes and you've got muscle spasms and that's creating problems. And when you get muscle spasms, you get reduced blood flow to the joint, you get reduced movement, you can develop arthritis and pain. So these are issues that, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a little spasm. Oh, take care of it. If your feet are cramping up every time you go to bed, imagine what your arteries are doing that you don't feel, right? Your arterial tree is muscles. You have to understand that. And if you've got chronic spasms in your skeletal muscles, you could also have chronic spasms in your arterial muscles, and that could reduce your blood flow and your oxygenation and increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. So muscle spasm is no joke. You want to address it. Spinal misalignment. Your spine is basically the cornerstone of how your brain and your spinal cord communicate to your organs and the rest of your body, and vice versa. It's how your body communicates back to your brain and spinal cord. So misalignments in the spine can certainly create dysfunction and contribute to autoimmunity. Chronic injury. For those of you who've had chronic injuries or maybe it's lifting something at work and you've injured your back or your shoulder or whatever it might be, but chronic injuries are definitely structural issues. Osteoporosis, your bone is structure, right, is part of your structure. Inadequate muscle tone or atrophy, and I would say those of you that fall in the obese category are also under-muscled. You're overweight and you're under-muscled, and it's part of the problem. And if you put some muscle on, you'll increase your metabolism, you'll increase your speed of energy production, and you'll help your obesity. So these are all just examples. We look at the cycle here on this slide, the vicious cycle. As we age or develop illness, we exercise less, right? When we hurt, we don't generally exercise. We're told to exercise less because we're getting older as well. That's another common myth. Our false mindset is the older we get, the less exercise we're capable of doing, which isn't true. We accept joint pain and physical limitations as a consequence of age instead of our past actions or inactions. If you don't exercise and you don't take care of your body physically, you're going to hurt more. You're going to be tighter, you're going to be stiffer, and you're going to be more prone to joint pain and physical limitations. But that's not because you're getting older, that's because of your behaviors, your past behaviors. If you look at the diagram to the right, you'll see here what I call the grainflammation cycle, which is grain consumption leads to inflammation, leads to increased cortisol response. Cortisol elevations cause muscle loss, which leads to weight gain, which leads to joint compression and joint pain, which leads to exercise avoidance. And if you avoid exercise, you end up with muscle loss, which leads to more weight gain and more joint compression. And you can see it's a very vicious cycle. And how can we inject into that cycle? Well, you can strike grain from the diet as part of your equation to overcome autoimmune disease. But the other thing that you can do is you can inject exercise to tolerance into this equation. And you can begin wherever you're at, whatever your body is capable of beginning to start doing, you should. Exercise is vital to achieve vitality. And so maintaining lean muscle mass prolongs the human lifespan. This has been studied and well documented. Muscle's not just for moving joints, it's an immune system storage facility. This is why cancer patients waste. Their immune systems are stealing the protein from their muscle to fight the cancer. That's called cachexia. But your muscle is a backup immune plan. So the more of it you have, the more your immune system is going to be resilient to those changes. And if you've got autoimmunity, you really need to think about building lean muscle. Muscle movement increases oxygen uptake by the brain and other tissues. It improves lymphatic flow, which helps your body to detoxify. Muscle use helps regulate blood sugar and insulin levels, which reduces the potential for inflammation. And muscle helps you sweat if you use it from exercise. It improves detoxification as well. I've done an entire crash course on the benefits of exercise and muscle as medicine. And I encourage any of you who have done diet change and done all the other things we've talked about in this series, but haven't really instituted the exercise, please watch my masterclass on muscle as medicine to get better insight here. A note with those of you with chronic pain or injuries, start slowly, increase your activity based on your tolerance. Don't go all out on day one. Find someone with experience who can guide you. If a good physical therapist, a chiropractor, a certified trainer, ideally somebody with good 5 years of experience working with people with injury. Chiropractic, physical therapy, acupuncture, deep tissue manipulation can all be effective strategies for treatments in helping you recover from those injuries. Heat via infrared or cold via cryogenic chamber can be effective and helpful. And then more aggressive treatments like platelet-rich plasma injections. Some people opt for stem cell injections, and those can have profound effects. I would say if you're opting for that, going in that direction, before you do, consider your nutrition. Your cells are only as healthy as your diet. And so if you haven't changed your diet yet and you haven't checked your nutrition yet, do that first before spending, because PRP and stem cells are expensive. And if you're going to maximize that therapy, change your diet and get your nutrition dialed in, because your therapy will be so much more effective if you do. We've seen that time and again where people went and did the stem cell or went and did the PRP. It didn't work. We changed their diet. We changed their nutrition. We gave them the right nutrients. And they went back and had the therapy and it worked. So, diet becomes a very, very important part of your physicality. Remember, you really can't separate diet from physicality. Anyway, here's some home-based action steps. Consider these actions before drugs and surgery: self-care, stretching, foam rolling, self-massage, or alternative massage. Supplements such as vitamin C and quercetin, omega-3, proteolytic enzymes, turmeric, glucosamine, white willow, boswellia, calcium, magnesium, and MSM, all fantastic for pain. I did a show also on natural remedies for pain. We'll put a link below and you can check that show out too if you're looking for some more in-depth information on that topic. Look, physical contact, human touch has healing properties. Hand holding, hugging, sex, all important. I don't know where you're at in your life and your relationships, but there's a healing power to human touch. We are definitely social animals and need to have human connection. So seek that out if you don't have it. Think about that if you don't. Consistent movement. Take many walking breaks at work. Consider ergonomic chairs or standing desks, treadmills under your desk. Try to achieve 10,000 steps a day. And if that's new to you and 10,000 seems daunting, then start with 3 or 4,000 and work your way up. Try to implement some yoga or organized guided stretching. Rebounders, trampolines, whole body vibration, desk treadmills, all these are good ideas. There's not one right 100% fit or solution for everyone, but look at these ideas and try to implement them where you can. With exercise, there's 3 kind of basic core fundamental things that you're after. You're after strength, you're after cardio, and you're after flexibility. If you look at this diagram, these are just some examples. Perform to your tolerance. It's better to do too less than too much. If you injure yourself trying to start an exercise program, you're out for the count. You may take yourself out for a few months, and that's not good for you. So go in slow. HIIT training is very effective. HIIT stands for high intensity interval training, and this is just, one of my favorite mechanisms of HIIT is something called Tabata, T-A-B-A-T-A. It's a 4-minute exercise where you do 20 seconds of work followed by 10 seconds of rest. So it's 20 on, 10 off in a 4-minute pattern. Pick one exercise and do it for 4 minutes. It's a form of high intensity that is very, very effective and very, very low injury pronicity when you're doing it that way. If you struggle, consider swimming or vibration platforms if you're overweight or you're just in a lot of pain and you just can't, maybe your knees hurt when you try to go for that walk. Get in the swimming pool instead. Maybe consider yoga instead. There are different options here for those of you who have some limitations. If you're working with the doctor, depending on the doctor's expertise, get a complete physical movement exam performed. Ask for guidance. Ask for a referral. Ask about non-invasive treatment options like cold laser, ultrasound, FSM, TENS, and EMS. Chiropractic manipulation, acupuncture, stem cell PRP therapies are all good things that you could attempt if your pain is a limitation to your activity, because you got to overcome the pain so that you can get to the activity. It's the catch-22 that we want to break through. One of my favorite recovery stories was a gentleman by the name of Greg. He had one of the most unique autoimmune problems. And in his case, it was finding triggers. It was diet and lifestyle change that really honestly saved his life. But I think hearing his story will give you hope and help you understand the power of diet and lifestyle.
I had suffered for a number of years from a serious skin condition, a skin rash that had started on my legs and eventually worked its way up over my entire body. The condition was undiagnosed by what I would call traditional medicine. I went to dermatologists, I went to allergists for testing. I took a number of what I would again call traditional medicines, steroids, over a long period of time with no relief. I saw probably 60 dermatologists, so much so that I was taken by one of the dermatologists I was seeing. I was taken to the VA hospital here in Houston for a dermatology convention. I was asked to be looked at by the people attending the convention. So I went to an exam room at the VA and sat in my underwear for half a day while dermatologists from all over the country came by and looked at me and asked if they could take pictures of it and said it was really interesting. And we have no idea what it is. One doctor decided it was formaldehyde allergy, and so I was tested for an allergy to formaldehyde, which I was not allergic to. So this went on for a long time. And I finally did, although I didn't have psoriasis, I started eating a psoriasis diet, and it did provide some relief. But I relapsed back into having the very, very bad skin rash again. Then in February of 2014, I was rushed to the hospital and had perforated colon. So I had colon surgery for them to repair my colon. So it was getting worse and worse and worse. At the suggestion of a friend who was being treated by Dr. Osborne, went through extensive testing here, was diagnosed with allergies to many of the foods that I was eating, and over a period now of about 6 months, the skin condition has gone away, it's cleared up. No one that I was dealing with in dermatology or allergy was talking about anything to do with any of the foods that I was eating. It was always diagnosed as a skin condition, not as an internal condition that was showing up on my skin. And it was only Dr. Osborne who determined that it was indeed allergens that I was putting into my body that my body was allergic to. My skin was what was trying to get it out of my body, so it was coming out through my skin. It was never looked at as something that my body may be doing from the inside out rather than from the outside in. There was no way that I would ever go back to trying to live the way that I lived before, to eating the foods that I ate before, knowing that I'm allergic to them, knowing that it's a hereditary condition, that it's something that I did get from my parents, knowing that my father actually passed away from diverticulitis. But now I know what my issue is and will continue to be, and I will continue to live a gluten-free, grain-free, dairy-free life. You might not find your answers with the type of doctors that you would normally think that you should go to. Again, my skin condition, you would think dermatology. I had tremendously bad seasonal allergies. My daughter was on the drill team, and my son played soccer, and so I was always in the spring and in the fall, I was always out on the soccer fields or out at the football games watching my daughter cheer, and it was misery. I could barely see, my eyes would get so bad. I'd get the hacky cough and the whole bit. And this is the first spring that I've been through now where I have evidenced no issues at all with my allergies. We recommend Dr. Osborne to friends of ours on a regular basis. We already have people that are in here because of our recommendation. My son, who is a cardiothoracic surgeon at a major hospital, is having issues, and he's thinking of coming down and seeing Dr. Osborne. So it only makes sense.
Okay, let's dive into the last stage here, which is emotional and spiritual. Look, this is can be a major trigger for autoimmunity, is the emotional spiritual side. Hope is a requirement for healing, and many people with chronic disease have been sick for 10, 20, 30 years, started to lose hope, or in many cases, maybe not hopeless, but just not hopeful. Know that your body can heal. As I mentioned earlier in this program, your body has the ability to heal. It knows what to do. We have to remove what's interfering. We have to remove the things that are driving the inflammation, and we have to give the body what it needs to heal, repair, and restore. Your thoughts can become you, and that's an important understanding. If you dwell on negative thoughts, those negative thoughts become you, right? You are what you think. Laughter is the best medicine. I get a lot of patients who, they're chronically ill, and I ask them, one of the questions I ask, when's the last time you had fun? And I'd be surprised how many people haven't had fun in a decade or more. You got to kind of try to recapture that. I know it's very easy for me to stand here and say, hey, go have fun or recapture it. And it's a lot harder if you're with a chronic diagnosis, but you need to think on it, and you need to do your best to change your thoughts. Unresolved emotions can and will set you back. A lot of people live in the past, and so their past becomes their present, and so their future can never be bigger or better than what it is. And so you have to resolve. If you've got past things that you struggle with, or past trauma that you struggle with, that you've got to come to some kind of resolution, because reliving it repetitively over and over is not going to move you forward to great health, and it's going to be kind of a block in your roadmap to recovery. Be a partner advocate with a good functional medicine doctor. Expand your horizons. Read books. A lot of you are here because this is your book, right? You're watching the video. It is your book, right? So audiobooks, podcasts, things of that nature. Expand your mind. Explore topics you're passionate about that bring fun to your life. Observe the world around you. Use the internet as a tool, but don't use the internet as an all-day excuse to not have a life. Discover love of a new hobby. Learn from others and return the favor. Play it forward. Play with the child. If you've got grandkids or children, remember what it was like, that kind of, before you became cynical and sick. Remember what it was like to be an innocent child, and go try to recoup some of that. These are all therapeutic things that you can focus on trying to do. Prayer. Control what you can. Give up the rest. Give it to the Lord. Surround yourself with supportive people. If you surround yourself with people who say you're never going to get better, so it's kind of like, I learned this a long time ago. I've had for over 25 years, I've had mentors in my life, and one of the best pieces of advice I got a long time ago was, you are who you hang out with. And if you hang out with people who say you can't, say you won't, say it's impossible, and give negative belief to you, then that's going to be your reality. You, in essence, are a manifestation of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So look at who those people are. And if those people love you and care about you and are helping you, then you're in good company. But if those people are dragging you back, you really have to reevaluate who you're surrounding yourself with. Consider meditation. It works for many, many people. Try a float tank. If you don't do meditation well, a float tank or a sensory deprivation tank can be profoundly life-altering and changing. They were for me at one point in my life. EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's a type of stress management technique. Positive affirmations. Educate yourself. Most health errors are made from ignorance. Most disease is caused by ignorance of making the wrong decisions. And hopefully you're learning what some of those are today in this video. Know thyself. Prevention versus treatment. An ounce of prevention is a pound of treatment, or a pound of cure. I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said that. Eating well, sleeping well, exercising well, getting sunshine, breathing clean air, drinking clean water. That's your prevention. That's your non-negotiables. Those are things that you can do that will help your body. Not doing those things will lead to not helping your body, which will lead to hurting your body by default. So prevention is where it's at, and prevention is in your behaviors. Be proactive versus reactive. Once you get healthy, stay proactive. The healthiest people I know are all proactive. They make it part of their life to accommodate their choices and behaviors around how healthy they want to be. Invest in time in acquiring knowledge. This brings you intelligence. Invest time in applying your acquired knowledge. This brings you experience. Teach others. Watch outcomes. This brings you wisdom. And be accountable to yourself first. Don't blame your situation on your doctor. Don't blame it on others. Don't blame it on things that happened to you in the past. Those things that happened to you in the past may have led to where you're at, but if you continue to blame them, you'll continue to be sick. If you're going to work with an expert, biofeedback is something to ask about. You can work with a pastor if you're spiritual and you believe that would be the best choice or option for you. Some people find that working with a psychologist or psychiatrist can be helpful. I would have caution there, not to say that those things can't be helpful, but this is just me sharing my experience as part of the work that I do is pastor related. A lot of times when people go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, depending on that professional's belief, they rehash their past with every session. This is basically, excuse my language, their therapy session becomes a bitch session to keep bringing up the past that they can't change. And so it's a bitch vent session that doesn't help promote them to move forward in their life or grow from their past experience. Again, that's not to say that every psychologist or psychiatrist is that way, but there would be some caution around that. Like, don't get wrapped up into that game of just reliving the past through talk therapy. You've got to find a way to move on. Okay, let's kind of reframe. We just talked about a tremendous amount of information, and let's reframe it. Here's the diagram again. Let's blow this up. The autoimmune recovery matrix. If you have autoimmune disease, you should investigate that top row. There's 8 things there. Those things can be measured. They can be objectified. From those, you can see below that, there's testing. That's how we objectify and measure. And then based on those tests, you can develop a blueprint or a roadmap to follow. And pretty much all of these things revolve around you. This is the good news. It revolves around your ability to make a choice. What to eat, what not to eat, what to expose yourself to, what not to expose yourself to, how to support yourself nutritionally with supplementation, what foods to avoid, what chemicals to avoid, whether or not you need probiotics. The vast majority of these things don't really require any medical care. They just require action on your behalf. Some of them may. But now you have a starting point. I want you to, really the takeaway I want you to walk away from this video with is this. There are fundamental triggers to autoimmune disease. Despite what your doctor has told you, it's not genetic. There is hope. Your body knows how to heal. Drugs don't provide a long-term solution. They provide a symptomatic reduction. But what are the triggers? If we simplify it, I want to make it as simple as I can. Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the 4 chemical categorical triggers for autoimmune disease. Investigate them. Now, the spiritual side and the emotional side can also be a trigger. Investigate that as well. Physical deterioration of your body and frame can also be a trigger. You need to investigate that as well. But if you investigate all these, as you see here in this diagram, in this matrix, you're on the path to healing and recovery. Where people fail is when they do one thing at a time. I said this earlier. It's called piecemealing it. Don't piecemeal the approach. You have to be comprehensive. Autoimmune disease is comprehensive. It's multifactorial. There's not one cause, there's multiple causes. And oftentimes it's, what we see in our clinic is, you might be reactive to 10 foods. You might have, 5 or 6 vitamin or mineral deficiencies. You might be being exposed to some chemicals in your soaps, lotions, or shampoos that are driving your immune system crazy. Like, there may be 20, 30, 40 triggers within the framework of this matrix that are all happening simultaneously to drive your immune system into overtime and create a chronic inflammatory state. So try to address it as close to simultaneous as you can. Remember, there's no perfect approach for everyone. Biochemical individuality trumps generic recommendations. There's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of doctors out there saying, go through my program, and I'm one of them. Look, I have No Grain, No Pain and Glutenology as a program that you can go through. And they're generic. They're not custom designed for you. They're just, here's information that if you apply might give you tremendous value and benefit in your life. But if you've done all that and you continue to struggle, biochemical individuality trumps generic choices. So getting objective testing done becomes, in my opinion, your next smartest move. Healing can take time, up to 3 years. A lot of people can do it in around 18 months. If we're talking about autoimmune disease, it's the 3-generation rule. What do I mean by 3-generation rule? Your immune cells have a life cycle of 6 months. And it takes 3 generations of those immune cells to calm the immune system down. If it's really high, 6 months later, it's a little calmer. 6 months later, it's a little calmer. Each time your immune cells are replaced, they're a little less overaggressive or overreactive. And that requires removing the triggers, right? So 18 months to 3 years. So be patient with it. You don't get sick with an autoimmune condition your whole life and be sick for 20 years and expect that, a week of a diet change or a week or 2 weeks or even a month of a diet change is going to miraculously cure everything that's been building for the last decade or more. So you have to be patient with yourself and give yourself grace, but you have to also take action. So if you look at remove the bad, this is the simplification. Remove the food allergens and sensitivities, remove the toxins, deal with the infections or microbial imbalances, deal with the inflammation, deal with the wrong relationships and the wrong people. Replace and repair. If you've had dysbiosis, put the good bacteria in. Repair your gut and your damaged tissues. Get the right food and the right nutrients in your body. Get the right environmental nutrients like sunshine and clean air and clean water and oxygen. The right relationships can make the difference. And then restore and maintain. You'll go through a healing phase, and once you're through the healing phase, your body will be on ground level, but that requires work. So you've got to work on building a solid foundation of health, and that is exercise, rest, sunshine, purpose, and love in your life. These are all very, very important things that you can't ignore or you can't bypass. Keep working the matrix. Sometimes you have to modify. Sometimes you find some triggers and you find an improvement, but remember that healing isn't linear. And a lot of people think, well, okay, I started today, 2 weeks from now it should be there. Healing isn't linear, it's up and down, it's ebbs and flows. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. And if you look at this diagram, intelligent and guided action. I look at intelligent and guided action as being you getting an education and making good choices, right? And then if that's working, great, keep going. But also guided action is if you're working with a good doctor and you're getting the right kinds of testing done, that's guided action, right? And then as you go through that intelligent and guided action, your body gives you feedback. That feedback is going to be all over the map. It's going to be, I'm feeling better. Maybe it's less pain. Maybe it's less brain fog. Maybe it's more energy. Maybe you're going through detoxes within part of your treatment, and maybe you take a step backward. Like, that's body feedback, right? And from there, you make adjustments. And if you're working with the doctor, make those adjustments with your doctor. That leads to improvements ultimately. And then you'll sometimes hit a roadblock and there'll be a setback, right? And that's when you go back to intelligent and guided action. This is a cycle. You keep working this cycle repetitively if you want to get better. Okay, what's next? So look, I hope that this video helps you. I really do. I really mean that. I hope if you're struggling with autoimmune disease that you came here tonight and that this 2 hours was worth your time, and that you found some valuable answers and things that you hadn't thought about yet and you can go and implement. But if you would like ongoing support, I want to encourage you to do a couple of things. Number one, I want to encourage you to sign up for my free newsletter. It comes out on a weekly basis, and it's full of very important and helpful information and education that might just give you more impact and feedback on how to navigate autoimmune disease. And you can go to Gluten Free Society and sign up there, or you can text us and we'll put that text on the screen here and you can text us to sign up. Number two, consider joining my Facebook support group. If you just need other people around you to kind of help navigate this, if you want to communicate with other people who've gone through this, join our group. It's free. There's no charge. You just have to go and answer the questions and then we'll invite you in. Number three, tune into my weekly classes. I'm here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. I'm also here every Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time to answer your questions. That's live Q&A session every week. And then lastly, if you're looking to work with somebody, we get this question a lot. Dr. Osborne, are you still taking on clients? We are. My clinic, we've got myself and another associate doctor. And if you are looking to work with a professional, don't hesitate to reach out. And you can use that code there to reach out to my practice, my nutritional practice, and get more information. We're here to support you. We're here to help you in whatever way that we can. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this information was helpful for you, And we will see you on Thursday for a live Q&A. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Osborne Zone. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more content like this, and make sure you come back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and Thursday at noon 30 for more episodes.